Daniel,
Yes.
are you getting any feedback off? Are you getting any additional feedback other than like my computer just beeped? Did you hear that on the?
I did.
Okay. Okay, let's see.
But I'm not hearing any audio from YouTube echoing or anything.
Okay. Okay.
Have you heard from Mark? Do you know if Mark is going to join us?
It's going to head in here yet.
I have not heard from Mark. Hopefully he will be able to, but I know he's often open
Okay, myself, I do go live.
Hi, people.
Okay, so I think we're at 3 whenever you're ready.
Megan, Elizabeth.
I just had to turn my lights on.
Okay. Hey, Bill, welcome. Hey, everybody. Yeah, I guess welcome. Hello. I guess we'll get started. Welcome to everybody to this year's Fire on the Mountain Festival. Hope you've all been following along with us today. Tons of online demonstrations and studio visits with some of our most beloved blacksmiths and metalsmiths and metal artists in the area here around Spruce Pine. Today's all-day event, is quite a bit different than we're used to setting up in Spruce Pine, but it's been cold and rainy here all day, so I'm kind of glad that we're not in the street fighting the wind and the rain with all the forges. But it's been this is a big departure, but it's been a real labor of love for a lot of us who've worked to sort of move this festival onto the internet. And we're also really looking forward to October here in Spruce Pine, because Fire on the Mountain will have set up at the Spruce Pine Barbecue and Bluegrass Festival. And so fingers crossed that everything goes smoothly between now and then. And we really look forward to seeing folks in person in Riverside Park in Spruce Pine. Also really big thanks to all the individuals who helped create this event today. Everybody at Spruce Pine Main Street, Toe River Arts, everyone at Penland School, and specifically Brady Connolly for creating the amazing videos that we all been watching today. And to all of our guests, metalworkers in the room with us. So also thank you to everybody who's joining us live for this conversation. To the audience, anybody who's out there, please don't be shy. We encourage you to just drop questions into the chat at any time, and we'll sort of answer them as best as we can as they come up. So my name's Daniel Beck. I'm the Iron Studio Coordinator at Penland School of Craft here in Mitchell County, North Carolina. I'll be the host for the afternoon. So I guess we could get started with some introductions. Just to start, I'll call on folks just to kind of keep it moving. If you could just tell us your name, your studio or business name, and if you consider yourself an artist blacksmith or a sculptor or metalsmith, etc. So with that, why don't we start with the 2021 Fire on the Mountain Master Blacksmith. Elizabeth, you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Elizabeth, and I'm thrilled to be the Master Blacksmith this year. I've been following the Fire on the Mountain ever since we started, and it's a big honor. And again, I too am so happy we're not downtown on this miserable day. I depending on who I'm talking to, I'll call myself a blacksmith or a metalsmith or a sculptor. I really think I am an artist blacksmith because I use blacksmithing techniques, traditional blacksmithing techniques, to make the things that I make. But when you tell some people that you're a blacksmith, they automatically think of a farrier because they're ignorant. And the Fire on the Mountain Blacksmithing Festival is a really great way for us to educate the public. And that's why it's so important to me, because it's not just for blacksmiths, it's for everybody. And usually there'll be fun things for kids to do and lots of interesting food to try. And so the Fire on the Mountain is a really, really cool thing.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Next, why don't we jump over to Megan?
Hey everyone, I'm Megan. I would say that I'm a metal worker or a blacksmith. I feel like in order to make my work, I like to combine forging and fabrication and kind of a little bit of everything. I'm living in Spruce Pine currently and share a shop with Andrew Mears. And yeah.
Thanks, Megan. Mears, you want to go next?
Sure. My name's Andrew Mears. I mostly make, I'm a knife maker and I do a little bit of metalsmithing as well. And I share a studio with Megan Martin.
Perfect. Paige, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Sure. I'm Paige Davis, and I have a studio at the Mushroom Factory outside of Silo, North Carolina. It's a little group of studios. I call myself, I think, an artist metalsmith because I also make jewelry. And it feels like the same techniques, just larger or smaller. Yeah. Next year will be my 50th year of doing this. So anyway, okay.
Congratulations. That's a big one.
It is a big one.
Yeah. Next up, how about Cole?
Hi, I'm Cole. I moved to Bakersfield probably about a month and a half ago, and I kind of do a little bit of everything. I'll do fabrication and do tractor repairs and do production blacksmithing work to sell my product line, and also a little bit of sculpting if I can find time, but kind of do whatever comes my way, which is kind of what blacksmithing has always been about. At least like historically, they were able to serve the community some sort of role or purpose. So it's fun to be able to kind of do a little everything.
Perfect. Thank you. Bill, you want to go next?
Hello, yeah, Bill Brown here. I'm in Linville Falls. Been in the studio 40 years. Consider myself an artist sculptor, and it's good to be here with everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. And how about Seth next?
Hi, everyone. My name's Seth Gould, and I have a shop here at my home in Bakersville, North Carolina, where I live with my wife and son. And I consider myself a blacksmith, but also a metalsmith and tool maker. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thanks, everybody. Let's see. Yeah, I want to remind everyone out in the audience, don't hesitate to ask. Put some questions in here, and hopefully we can make this sort of a conversation. And to all of our guests here too, feel free to jump in to add or to elaborate on something anybody else says. But I guess I'll start with I just it was so great to be able to sit here in the rainy day and see inside people's studios and see the demonstrations. But Elizabeth, there were a number of power hammers out there that I noticed. And that's always a good point of interest. But Elizabeth, yours seems like older than a lot of the other ones. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that hammer and how you came to be part of it?
Okay, sorry. I need to move this around so that we can see it. Can you see it, Daniel?
It's a little backlit, but I think we can see it back there.
Well, when I move this, I got lights on it. Is that better?
Yeah, that's a little bit better.
Lord. Anyway, this power hammer it's I swear I practiced with this. This power hammer, it's a Bradley power hammer. It was built in 1909. And if I get over here, you can see, it's a mechanical hammer, which means it has a motor on it. I'm not going to get too worked up about having this picture in the right place, because you can watch the video and you can see the whole thing and how it works then. But I want to tell you that this beam here is wood, and see it's attached to this the die down here at the bottom, which makes it really kind of like a mechanical hand hammer with a wooden handle and a metal face. And it's got these cushions, these rubber cushions that I'm not going to attempt to spotlight either, but it's got these cushions. And I bought it in Columbus, Georgia, over 20 years ago. And it hadn't been used for a real long time. So I had to get those rubber cushions remade, and I had to get a new belt for it. And so it kind of got renovated, and it's a big hammer. It's 125-pound Bradley Helve hammer is what it's called because of the wooden beam. And so when it turned 100, I had a birthday party for it here in my studio, and that was a lot of fun. So maybe I'll get to do that again someday.
Yeah, like those tools in particular, I think we all have tools that they become like another, I don't know, a studio assistant or something like that. You know, they become like another person or a friend. So it
Yeah.
makes sense that you'd celebrate, celebrate birthdays for various things, but that's an old one. Cool.
It works really good though. It's way too much hammer for me, really. But when people start telling me about how, why don't you get rid of that thing and get you a little air hammer, I'd like, I couldn't do that. I'm sure I will someday, but anyway, it is cool.
It's super cool. Well, thanks. Paige, did you have a question? Or a comment?
Daniel, did you introduce yourself?
Oh,
It's true.
Please do.
yeah. I'm Daniel Beck, and I work up at Penland School as the coordinator of the Iron Studio. I've worked here for 10 years, but I consider myself a sculptor. I work in lots of different mediums. I do forged iron work. I do a lot of fabrication, woodworking, concrete. It's kind of all kinds of stuff. When I started metalsmithing at the University of Georgia in the early 2000s, and then actually the person who had my job at the time came to Georgia and taught a blacksmithing workshop. And I learned about Penland and blacksmithing in the same go around. And over the course of the next few years, made my way here. And so I guess I've been blacksmithing for about 17 years and metalsmithing for almost 20. But yeah, that's my arc. Thanks, Paige. Elizabeth wanted to tell you from the chat, Doug Smith says hello.
Thank you. That's Michelle's husband.
Yeah, welcome, Doug and Michelle. I guess I want to jump over to Bill Brown Jr. for a sec. Bill, I was looking at the video today, and I've been out to your shop and stuff like that too. It was cool to see pictures from what seemed like when you were getting your start. But when did you start moving sort of from, hammer and anvil work that you began on to these sort of like more monumental, like larger outdoor sculptures? Was that like a period of time that you shifted in that direction, or was that a conscious shift to go big?
Yeah, it was a conscious shift. I was doing more traditional stuff, a little bit like Cole was talking about. When I came here in 1980 or 81, I'd do anything it took to make a living because I had a family and stuff. So, I'd weld a hitch on a truck or put a snowplow on if I had to, which I think is a good thing. So you learn a lot through that. And anyway, I was doing more traditional style work through the 1980s. And then in the late 80s, I was really getting a little bit tired of the traditional work and also the people who didn't want to pay for it. And so I was getting bored and thought, well, I could move this into more sculptural things that were in my head, and sort of went that direction. And I remember the first piece of sculpture I sold in Blowing Rock in must have been 1986 or so, 87, was for $300. And I was as happy as you can ever imagine anybody being. That something I just created for my own enjoyment got me $300. So, you start where you start and things all move forward. Thank you.
Yeah, interesting. But you also have continued kind of making smaller work as well. I know in your more gallery work and items like that. Is that something you're continuing these days?
Oh yeah. I'm still doing that, and do maquettes or models for the big work, and that's always a nice thing to do, to kind of wrap your head around how you're going to do it in large scale, and usually scale an inch to a foot and bring it up from there. And especially if I have helpers with me, they've got to know what direction that we need to go. Mm-hmm. So yeah, but it's still, I do this fair size of different things, and I enjoy being able to work by myself too, where I don't have to have any help. And that's where my big hammers help me by making it look like clay or feel like clay. I've always liked that. I did glass years ago too, and really enjoyed the movement of the glass. And so if you get it hot enough and hit it hard enough, it'll move like glass. So hot glass. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think we all kind of love that nature of steel, and it goes from being a hard industrial structural material and put some heat into it, and then right. Yeah, it acts like anything else.
Right.
I don't know, with that. Yeah, thinking about how steel moves like that. I guess I have a question for Paige about that and the malleability of steel. Like, thanks to you too for showing us your studio and having a visit in there. But your work, I can always tell Paige Davis' work. You have this very like I don't know, this vocabulary that's very Paige, and it's always very smooth and elegant profiles in there. But can you tell us a little bit about your perspective on like working with hot forged steel in the two camps of kind of the force that it takes, as well as the finesse that is involved in making those shapes and forms?
Thanks, Daniel. Yeah, I feel like it's come from a jewelry background, and having good eyes at an early age and seeing everything this close, and making sure the finish and the texture was always really important. And then when I started doing ironwork, that was the eye that I brought to it. And so it didn't matter how big it was. It was important to me to have that finish, and didn't have to be a high polish. I love the texture that is on, say, a bronze sculpture where they've made it in clay and then cast it in bronze. So I'll use a grinder and get a good texture on it, but then it has to be very approachable, and it's not so much the hammer marks, it's the flow of the piece that's important to me, that you're seeing the whole visual rather than each hammer mark. I don't know. I feel like that's where I come from, is the, and growing up loving to move and dance and do stuff like that. It's just sort of like, yeah, let's do my pieces look like that.
Totally. Yeah, I find like in that stuff, your pieces are always really inviting to touch. Like I always want to put my hands on,
Thank
whether
you.
using diamond plate or hollow form or forged bar, like they're always super inviting.
Yeah, and making them still, you can read it as what the material is, but taking it away from its machined state and just softening it all, but having it still read as to what it started out with.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a great nature and material. Yeah, thank you. Let's see, maybe next I'll move over to let's see, Seth. Your video studio tour, you showed us, both your work of working in multiples, with, they be product design or hand tools, and those like more complicated, locking mechanisms, I guess. Do you sort of like, does the process of making incremental, you said like you make improvements on designs of things, like does that process of doing that for something, say like a hammerhead, does that inform ways that you approach a more intricate puzzle box that isn't in, maybe has multiple components, but is its own thing? Like, do those two practices talk to each other for you?
Yeah, I mean, they definitely, everything's certainly influences everything else in the way that I work. And I guess I'll say that I used to really not enjoy doing production work at all. And as I've started to understand how I enjoy working and the challenges that I like to give myself, I've come to really enjoy production work and figuring out how to make those things in multiples. And that in itself is its own learning process. And that's what I'm always challenging myself with in the studio, trying something new, whether that mean a brand new technique or making multiples of things efficiently. And so in the way that they're both, challenging me to learn that way, that's really, that's how they influence each other. But a lot of times I'm figuring out much different things, I guess, with those one-of-a-kind pieces.
Yeah. And I've seen the arc of those develop as well. Like, when you're working on, it's got to take a lot of brain power to sort of start figuring out, hinges and springs and the clearances and wards and all that stuff. But do you get so immersed in the one that you're working on, and trying to solve those problems? Or are you at the same time thinking about, like, I'm sure you're getting like, oh, I have ideas for the next one and maybe something down the future, but do you find yourself like problem solving into the future while you're problem solving in the now?
I mean, that would be smart of me. I hope I am.
Is that possible?
I find that with the really, the more involved pieces, I spend so much time in my own head. I don't do any, CAD drawings or anything like that. It's all, I'm figuring out one thing to the next. So I spend so much time in the moment trying to think about, making sure I'm not building myself into a corner that I can't back out of. And so I definitely glean things from that and pick it up for future projects. But usually they're technical things like how to make a screw or how to make keys better or something like that. Whereas the things that are really challenging,
Oh, Henry's got something to say?
Yeah. Henry had something to add. The things that are really challenging that I'm really trying to figure out are going to be brand new challenges for myself. So that's what I'll spend the most time. But
yeah, that makes sense. Like a lot of refinements will be happening within, like you said, the screws and the wards, keys, like that refining process. I could see that connecting.
And that's where the multiples come into play, because it's like making multiple hammerheads. There's a lot of things that are the same as making multiple screws.
That's right. Awesome. Thanks, Henry and Seth. Let's see. I've got a question to sort of to everybody, maybe, or anyone who wants to answer. what's sort of been the largest challenge of running, a small business or a studio? And how have you worked, for people who've had careers so far, 30, 40, 50 years, running a small business is difficult. How have you worked to create longevity in that career in metalworking? To anybody. Maybe
It's Bill here.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill. Thanks.
Yeah. I just think about the thing of to get up and do it every day and don't stop. And as being your own business person, you've got to get yourself out of bed every morning. And I used to start at 8:30 every day and quit every day at 5 and do that 6 days a week. I used to have logging trucks that used to go by here when I was by myself in the 1980s, and I'd hear them rumble by in the morning, and I knew if I stayed until they went by again, it'd be late, and so I would wait for that truck to go by. So I used anything I could to keep myself going and keep my mind where I would keep working. So there are certainly a lot of business tricks to try to stay solvent and keep moving forward as your business moves forward with you.
Right.
And I think being able to roll with the punches is really important, because things don't work out right all the time. And connect with each other, I think, is important too. Connecting with other folks that are in business to help you out and ask the right questions or figure out what the questions are is pretty important. So it's a difficult thing being in business for yourself, and you got to be willing to take the hits and along with the really good things that happen. So that's just a few thoughts. Anyway, thank you.
Right. Yeah, totally. I, like for myself, I've always had a steady paycheck, and I kind of do my artistic work on the side. And I've found that for me is a way that I can make less production things because I have a paycheck coming in, and it leaves me room to sort of make more sculptural work or be more experimentational, and not necessarily rely on being a studio, a fully, sort of small business, fully supporting myself on my creative work, which I think also is, a totally valid approach to like making a life as an artist, for me. Paige, you wanted something to add there? Oh, you're muted, Paige.
Unmute. Excuse
Perfect.
me,
No
people.
problem.
Yeah, I think a similar journey to Bill's is just, I realized early on, starting at Penland, that it was a gift to me to get almost obsessed with metal and have this world open up of all the things that you could do with it. And the possibilities in my head never ended. They just kept on, ooh, and I was doing that thinking forward thing where you just, ooh, I can do this. I'll make another bracelet and it'll be like this instead. So that obsession has kept me going for a long time. And I think through the late 70s and 80s, that was when the craft fair world really opened up, the high-end ones. And so you had this boom of opportunity. So I was lucky enough to get in on that. And then by the time I started a family in the early 90s, I had already lived a life of being a metalsmith. And I felt like at that point, there was enough information out there for people to continue to order or commission work, and you go from doing production to more commissions, or you mix them up. And also, like Bill said, it's 10-hour days, and you're in there and you're just hopefully loving what you do. Not every day, one day you're filing all day or whatever, but it's a deep commitment to just loving what you do and being willing to get in there and grind or hammer or whatever it might be, and feeling like you're helping the world see this beautiful part of the world and what humans can do.
Right. Yeah. I think you gotta love you gotta love the day in, day out, the actual using your hands. That,
Yeah.
when you said the grind, I was thinking, yeah, the grind for sure, but like grinding, using an angle grinder, or actually like
Yeah.
the day in, day out, the daily grind,
That's what I meant. Yeah, either one.
you gotta grind.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. And I think that there's lots of ways, lots of different approaches to that in this room. Anybody else want to add to that, how they've been, or I can?
Yeah. The most difficult part is in the general instability of income and American life in general. That's the hardest part.
Mhm.
Mixed with rising housing and property costs, difficulty in getting a mortgage and not having like stable income is my biggest problem. But it's not, I don't think it's especially cheery, but that's kind of the place we're in, and looking forward to continuing, and may have to shift more into getting some kind of stable income and doing it more as something that I enjoy rather than as my main source of income.
Yeah, right. It's really hard to go into a bank and try to convince them that what you're doing is sustainable and financially responsible, when like it is. We make livings, but it's not in the same framework of what is normally expected as sort of like accumulation of wealth or like generational wealth, and however those kinds of things, whether it be property or
Yeah,
whatever.
even little things like getting general liability and basic insurances, paying your taxes. Like every time this year I'm broke, and it just like becomes almost intolerable thinking about getting older. So, I mean, not to be, just to be real about it, it's like, yeah, I have like nothing. I have a bunch of old junk and tools, and to not admit that that's the like most challenging and stressful part. The I'm up and then I'm down and up and down and up and down, and there's about spending time in the studio. Sometimes like this last month, it's been about 50-50, some of it not doing actual work, and that affects your ability to generate income. And it's anyway, that fluctuation and is really problematic, and not being able to hire people to help offset some of that, becomes, so there's a lot, but basically instability is my biggest challenge.
Right. I think the first thing that popped into my head when I read the question in the chat was like just the word overhead popped into my head. And it's like that's always like the biggest thing. And it's not just employees, but it's the space and the equipment and the insurance and the like really dynamic shifting, waves of demand and market pressures. It's like all those kinds of things. It's tough, but metalworking is pretty fun. It's a good life, for the most part. Well, cool. I think I want to jump over to Megan, I think. And let's see, your work too is always, it's like you have this really nice capability of making work that exists in this, like, to me, seemingly very contemporary, like furniture or sculpture kind of realm. And then also on the other side of the spectrum, like in your demo for today with the miner's candle, can you tell us a little bit about what you like about sort of working on with that? I mean, you do things that are in the middle too, but working in the whole spectrum of that kind of design language. Can you tell us what you like about that?
Yeah. What Cole said earlier has really stuck in my head of like kind of playing a lot of different roles as a metal worker. And I think that's something that keeps me engaged and keeps me interested, and that I enjoy letting myself be able to change. I learned from Jerry Karuba. He was my first mentor. He had a shop that ran off of a hand crank forge and had a hand crank drill press, and everything could be done without electricity. And so I learned very like traditional ways of forging. That was my foundation. I worked for Steve Bronstein after that, who does a lot of production and art and had machines and welders and sort of kind of used forging and welding together. So I definitely was influenced by those people early on, taking me under their wing and kind of showing me the different sides of blacksmithing. I really love to make functional things. I like the way that the function is set for you. And so that kind of dictates your design. And you can change things a little bit, but the function sort of drives the work in that. But I also really curious, and I like to kind of follow my heart and make sculpture. So that kind of gives me like a creative outlet. And I like taking kind of those fun moments that happen when I'm forging and trying to combine those into like vessels or things that can be in someone's home that they can look at every day and be inspired by.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think some of what you're touching on is that, always this ongoing conversation between like art with a capital A, and then design and craft. And you seem to really be like a lot of y'all, and a lot of metal workers, a lot of artists in general, just navigating between those worlds and trying things out, like functional things create their own parameters, right? I think is sort of what you were talking about. And like, so then your challenge is to tweak the design within, by keeping the function or hopefully improving the function of something. Whereas sculpture just can kind of just tend to be like, whatever you can imagine, those are the parameters there. So jump in. But yeah, do you find that you will like drift more towards one side or the other, and like stay more traditional for a while or more design oriented, or like kind of move back and forth through those considerations?
I think I really enjoy making things for other people, and people will say like, "Hey, I need this thing. Can you help me make it?" Or do you have an idea of how you could do that for me? So I feel like it's sort of driven by the conversation between people that want me to make something for them. And then that kind of inspires things. I also really love gardening and building things. And so I really love tools and garden tools. And that's just fun for me to sort of learn how to make those objects. And then, I don't know. I feel like I'm kind of in between too, and I confuse myself sometimes. Because I want to be in the functional world, but I know I also really just want to do what I want sometimes and just have like a funky idea that I just have to step aside from the function and kind of follow that road too. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think Elizabeth, you sort of your work comes to mind to me in this way, but in a different, like kind of from a different angle, because your work is seemingly, it starts from a place that's very traditional technique wise, welding in the forge, one of those 8 moves of blacksmithing or whatever. But then you also create these like very contemporary sculptural, evocative and, kind of pieces. Like, do you think about that still as you're working? Are you at the point now where it's more like, well, I've got this idea that I want to make, and I've compiled the skills, I know how to make it, and and you can just kind of get to it.
Well, excuse me, I still feel like I need to try to make things as well crafted as I can, because I always want my peers to respect what I do. Because when I first started, of course, there weren't a whole lot of women in blacksmithing. I want to mention, I think Paige was the first female to go to an Artist Blacksmiths Association conference as a participant in the craft rather than interested bystander. And I've always thought that was a neat thing about Paige. But when I started, I was one of the first few women blacksmiths, and so I got a lot of attention. And I was asked to demonstrate at conferences and stuff. And I thought, why do they want to look at what I'm doing? I'm just doing this regular stuff like everybody else does. But it was the things that I was making with those techniques that I think people were interested in.
Mm-hmm.
But it has always been really important for me to be respected by those traditional blacksmiths. And when they look at my work, to think, oh, well, she kind of knows what she's doing, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but.
Yeah, totally. I think my question is more just curiosity, about how that relationship works with you and with, I don't know, maybe just within blacksmithing in general, because it is such a seemingly, when you mentioned farrier, the connotation of horseshoeing, at the beginning, and, Cole touched on this too, of just like the blacksmith was always like a fixture of a community.
Mm-hmm.
And historically it went various ways. Typically a blacksmith would have been a specialist in one kind of a thing, less a generalist, the way that we sort of need to be these days. But just the field and as a whole does have this kind of like old world mystique to it. And some of y'all have seen it really rise up from being even less. I know when y'all were picking this stuff up, it was almost unheard of. It almost had disappeared, except for very few shops. And so that's got to be really interesting to see the parallels between your own careers as well as the arc of popularity that blacksmith has seen. In over the 5-10 years, but last 30-40 years too.
Well, I was telling somebody yesterday that I was invited to be a core student at the Penland School, and I don't know how many years ago that was, decades. But now that program is very, very competitive. And what happened was I had, in 1984, kind of invaded the blacksmith shop at the Penland School because I wanted to make some tools. And my whole class made those tools. But then I was intrigued and I went back and I said, can I make a hammer? And so they helped me make a hammer after it took me a whole week. But so then I was invited to become a core student for the next summer. And I decided to take a blacksmithing class as one of my classes that I could take in that capacity. And I don't think that at the time I would have spent a lot of money to come and take blacksmithing as just kind of a whim. So many things really just kind of fell together to let me find this craft in the first place. It's really kind of a miracle. And it's interesting. I think about that a lot.
Yeah, it's I do too. And getting to work with so many different kinds of people. My job at Penland
Yeah,
just knowing the blacksmithing community, it's really rich history.
that's where I got my whole education in blacksmithing was in the Penland Iron Studio.
Hmm.
Because when I was the iron coordinator, I watched every beginning forging class that was there. And
Hmm.
every time I watched it, I either gained another little insight or heard another way to describe what they were doing, even though they were doing the same thing. I just learned from every demo that I saw. And it was a wonderful way to learn.
Hmm.
And I,
Yeah, and I still do. Like, I was watching Mears's demo today,
uh-huh.
and it's a demo I've seen Mears give. It's a demo I've seen other instructors who do that work give, and everybody does it a bit differently. And Mears, what I really enjoyed about your demo is just like acknowledging sort of, like I'm holding the chisel this way, because we're filming, but also I would do it this way. You're always explaining things in a way that's there's as much there as people can pick up. There's just always so much more. And then so like when I was watching your demo, I don't know, another thing I was thinking about was your work has a lot of very complicated inlay and carving and engraving and things like that, and there's a lot of imagery and kind of stories involved in there. And I was wondering how, when you're deciding to do that sort of surface decoration on a piece, whether it's a vessel or a knife or a sculpture, like, how do you go about choosing your materials and your like I don't know, the like subject matter of those designs?
Usually with the theme, I guess it depends on, it's usually something from or lived experience, I guess, and sort of banal, seemingly banal, like if I saw a chicken on our hill or something, and I drew some moment of inspiration from that. And then the material selection usually depends on how in depth I want to make the color, or if I want to just do chasing and repose, or if I want to carve and overlay. And sometimes I have an idea for a theme and it's more fleshed out, and sometimes it's just a little more illustrative and monochrome, or just one color, and that will match the whole theme. I don't really have a set way of doing it. I just kind of do what I feel is best in the moment. And honestly, sometimes it's what can I do the fastest, or it's not always like as in depth, or I recycle themes or even
Right.
drawings, because if you just use it once, it's, you don't really get the full value out of it. So, and those take a little bit of time. So it's kind of a mix of things.
Right. And I imagine like, there's in bladesmithing, like there's a lot, back to what Megan said about, functional things and design. There's probably a lot of parameters that you have to hold within based on the form, type of knife, alloys that you're using and stuff like that. But then does you find like it's an enjoyable part of that practice to kind of like jump from that rigid sort of approach to what you were just describing as sort of like, well, whatever comes to mind, or whatever I'm feeling in the moment, or whatever's at hand?
Yeah, most definitely. It's very contrary to how I operate in my regular life, or how I naturally make something. It took a long time to learn how to be rigid in my practice and not kind of just wing it. It took a lot to train that out of me.
Yeah.
So the imagery and the inlays and anything that's like looser, even textures on the piece, those are a great way for me to feel a little more freedom than
Right.
how constrained the whole format can be. I mean, I sometimes just make whatever I want, but A lot of times you're constrained by form and profile.
Right, nice. Thanks. I think Elizabeth has her hand up, but before we jump back to Elizabeth, I want to shift over to Cole real quick. Let's see, Cole, like super cool seeing your studio set up down at the old PNR. So I know that one has been sitting there for a while. And I was wondering, for you, like some of your sculptural pieces have this real skeletal, they're kind of like these skeletal sculptures, almost prehistoric. And I wanted to ask, the question I wanted to ask you is like, what draws you to that subject matter? But then we also got a question in the chat about how has the, like, setting up a new studio informed that? And so maybe they are connected or maybe they're not, but if you could talk to us about that a little bit.
Well, when I'm setting up, I moved into my shop on the PNR in September. And right after I moved in, I went to John C. Campbell for a month to do a little, and I'm not sure what it was, more like a internship, like a paid internship to work there. So it was a good opportunity, but it was kind of a bad timing because as soon as I got ready to start working, I had to leave. So it was, when I got back, I really had to spend time to make sure I had the essentials of what I needed to get, just the bare minimum of infrastructure.
Sure.
And then, make up for lost time and get caught up on the backlog of orders. So that has, and that has affected my practice, my sculptural practices, and kind of destroyed it because you have to, at least for me, I have to focus on what's making money, and the sculpture is more a luxury for me.
Sure.
And but it's also, I think, there's less pressure to, especially with sculpture. It's hard to force myself to make an object like that because there's so much that I want to consider when I'm building it, and a lot of my inspiration comes from just animals I'll see in, around the shop or in nature, and just certain forms of animals that I find beautiful. I'll try to reproduce. And for me, it was hard to try to create animals that had skin or fur because steel doesn't have, to get those textures in steel is almost not worth the effort, at least for me, and the way I wanted to work in my three-dimensional forms that I like to do. But the bones really lent themselves to being forged, and I really enjoy almost like rearranging bones as a museum piece. You have to try to figure out how everything fits together, and it's hard enough working with bones when you're trying to put them back together, but with steel you have, the material really doesn't want to become a bone, and to see it happen and see almost the material come to life is really rewarding for me.
Yeah, I find those really interesting forms, and like you think about how, I don't know if you think about this while you're forging those shapes, but like the ways that bones grow, whether it be a broken bone or a child, bones are growing. They're growing against each other. It's really slow sort of way. That to me, it just kind of dawns on me that like, hot working two pieces of steel together also like inform that relationship. Like they're not growing in the same way, but they're like affecting each other.
Yeah, they're forced together almost.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I like the ways that you like it. Your pieces do remind me, sort of like natural history museums. You mentioned museum, and like designing and building in a stand, for those pieces too is also always a sculptural design choice. I really like the ways that you do that too. So,
yeah. I try to consider how to bring emotion into the animal, and I'm still learning. I've only made a couple sculptures through the years, but I'm learning how to present almost a narrative in the piece, and that's in trying to tell a story with what the creature is doing or how it's presented. And it's definitely a challenge because I think steel especially is hard to translate emotional, or especially to develop a narrative in a piece. And for me, the narrative is important, and having it be less abstract and more not intentional, but more clear what the narrative of the piece is, I find is because my background is in literature and poetry. So that's always what fascinated me is the storytelling. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do with the artwork.
Interesting. Cool. Oh, excellent. Well, thanks, Cole.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah, Elizabeth, did you have something to add from earlier or another comment?
Oh, I was just going to comment on Mir's video because
Oh, yeah.
I've seen a lot of people demo that before, including Mir's. But after watching his demo today, I thought I want to try that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I've never really tried in metal, but maybe I'll give it a go and add something new to my vocabulary. And
Yeah, and add to your shop too. You start go down that rabbit hole, end up with hundreds and hundreds of tiny little chisels before you know it. Hope your eyes are good.
Well, I have glasses.
Mm-hmm. Me too. Yeah.
Can I say a little bit more?
Sure.
When Cole was talking last year, when we had the art show downtown that nobody could go see in person, we went there, Daniel, remember? And
oh yeah.
I knew that Cole makes these skeleton looking things, and I had it in my head that he maybe had a degree in some kind of science or something, and maybe he wanted to be a archaeologist when he was a kid or something. And then I found out his degree is in poetry, and he writes poetry and does creative writing. I think that's real interesting because I think most of us did other things before. Well, I certainly did do a whole bunch of other things before I ever found blacksmithing. And I think that everything that I did, including printmaking and clay and jewelry, all adds to the way, like Paige said, how I respond to steel.
Yeah, absolutely. It always informs that. Cole, do you want to speak a little bit more about your do you have a current kind of writing practice in poetry or prose?
I haven't been writing a lot of poetry. I'll sometimes get inspired and write a couple lines down, but I really stopped writing, I would say, professionally and more not that I was ever making money from it, but I was taking it more seriously.
Mm-hmm.
It was probably about 2 or 3 years ago. And that's really when I started looking at metal sculpture and as an art practice, because for the first 6 years of my blacksmithing experience, I only did utilitarian work and really simple, or railings and installations. It was less artwork. And it was an interesting shift to look at the sculptural work I'm doing as poetry, because my poetry was always inspired by they were similar themes and they kind of started in the same way, where I would research my subject matter at hand, whether it was rats or tree growing patterns or whatever I was going to write or make art about. I would research it, and the research really, and with the discovery of information, it really lent itself to my imagination about how to, bring that to life and tell the object's story through my perspective.
Right. Yeah, very interesting. It's really, really cool to pull from those perspectives. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I would like to. We're getting close to 4 o'clock. I have anybody can please, if you're watching at home, please type one in the chat. Your chance of asking questions from the audience is shrinking, but I wanted to return back to Paige for a second, and something that Elizabeth had said about, like, I think I came across Paige's work first maybe in Metalsmith magazine maybe it was in the Anvil's Ring, but I think it was one of those, like, before I came to Penland, I thought. And so when Elizabeth said that, you know, when you were invited to either demonstrate or participate in a BANA as a first female, is that how that scene was then? What was that like?
Well, I guess the odd thing is that I didn't, I grew up on a farm and grew up just, well, you just do what you want to do. And so when I started learning metal, even though it started in jewelry, I didn't think about being a woman in it in a weird way. It was just a love. And my partner then was very supportive, and you know, I'd want to do other things like, oh, my brakes need working on my car, and he would just hand me the tools, and I'd be like, oh, okay, so I guess I'm so going into Abana. I have to say it felt a little weird because I realized I was a young woman, and you're kind of focused in on what's happening there, and at the same time dudes are looking at you. You know, it just is what it is, and they realize, okay, you're not just a wife, or you're not just somebody there, you're actually interested. And I remember my friend Noel Putnam said we had become friends, and because I was making parts for some of his smithing stuff, and he said, go hammer for this dude, you know, you can do this. I was like, oh, I can. He said, yes, you can. Just go up and volunteer when he wants a striker.
Right.
And so, you know, my hand flew up, and this guy was like, well, this looks like a, you know, kid, you know how to pick up a hammer? I was going, all right, here we go. Okay, so, you know, picked up the sledge from right behind the head of it and thought, all right, just get over this, you know, it's going to be all right. And then he started, and he let me strike for him, and he stopped for a minute. He was like, well, he said, that's like having a 90-pound hammer working for you, you know. I was going, all right, I'm not that scrawny, but anyway, you know, so there was this little back and forth. And I'm not somebody to get annoyed by any of that. And I just thought, yeah, I can do what I can do, and I'm just going to do it. I'm not going to get huffy. But it was an interesting world back then. And I was very happy to just go back to my studio. You know, it was before there was a program at Penland for smithing. So there was a lot of self-taught work in there, but I was really a studio artist, and I was happy just making, but realizing there was a bigger world out there was also inspiring, and it was supportive in its own odd way. It was supportive.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh, cool. Well, thanks. Yeah, and I find hopefully this talk today, just in general, it's nice to have the 10 of us together. You know, hopefully we can do this in person, because it's something I found in this community too, is like, it's those coming togethers, and you know, it is a really supportive field, you know, and yeah, it's been hard in many ways this year to be lacking in community and support in all kinds of ways. And I don't know, I just want to thank everyone for joining us. Thank everyone for sharing their time and their space and their work and their thoughts and everything. So we're a little past 4. Didn't know if anybody had any closing closing words they wanted from the 2021 Fire on the Mountain virtual festival today.
I might have something. I just wanted to offer myself. I could, if anybody, any of you or anybody listening out there would like to talk about business in blacksmithing, I would be happy to do it and share what knowledge I have, good and bad. because it is important, and that's the one thing we can do to keep working and sharing information between each other. So thank you. It's been good.
Thanks so much, Bill.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, all right. Thank you all so much. Let's see. Oh yeah, I want to remind everybody out there and folks here is the Blacksmith Challenge from this year's Fire on the Mountain is a barbecue fork out of 6 inches long, 5/8 square material. That's extended to the barbecue festival in October. You have as much time as you want to complete a barbecue fork using that. You can have a wooden handle, make a bone or leather handle, it can be anything. And we'll have some of those at the barbecue festival this year. If you would like to donate your fork or using it we'll be selling them to raise money to send 2 people to blacksmithing classes at John C. Campbell Folk School and Malin Community College in this area. And people available for those classes will be budding blacksmiths from Mitchell, Avery, and Yancey counties. We'll be at the barbecue festival, Barbecue and Bluegrass in early October in Spruce Pine. So hope we see you all there. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for putting this together, Daniel.
Oh,
And
everybody.
moderating. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. You bet. Thanks, everybody.
Goodbye.
Goodbye, Henry. Bye-bye.
Henry said it all. Thanks, everybody.